Okay. So I guess in the interest of time, we'll just go ahead and get into things. Today is November 28th, 2023. The first week after Thanksgiving. Brian is not with us today. Is he traveling or something?
I have no idea. He's out of town doing something. I'm not sure.
Out of town. Okay. So he's living his life and will be back next time, I'm sure.
I like that. He's living his life.
That's right. So, but with this week, we're just going to continue on with, I guess, kind of Israel, Palestine, Hamas, and everything, and just whatever else we get into ultimately, since it's been a couple weeks since we've spoken in general. I'm sure we'll kind of go into, different various tangents, but there it is. Do you have any, I guess, starters to talk about, Dave, that you were wanted to bring up?
No, I got thoughts. I don't know anything that will just, get us going. I just have random thoughts. I mean, they're in a ceasefire right now, which, I'll be honest, I know that it started as a hostage exchange, and now they're just in a ceasefire. I don't really know what's going on with that. I got the part of all this that's really interesting to me is I'm fascinated by people that are supporting the other side of this. It's really freaky to me how. You correct me if you think I'm wrong. I half suspect you do think I'm wrong, but it seems like there's a lot of blatant anti-Semitism from predominantly young people who probably don't know what the hell they're talking about. But the amount of river to the sea type shit, and you ask somebody what they mean by that, they wouldn't be able to tell you what river or what sea. But that type of shit is really fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, I brought up Thomas Sowell before. He made a point, and it wasn't in relation to this specifically, but he was talking about why Jews are hated throughout history. And he said, it's because they're successful. They're a successful minority. And we live in sort of, there's a resentment against success. I don't know if that's always been the case or if it's just something that I've experienced. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the same thing where it's fuck that guy for being rich or whatever. Fuck that, fuck Elon Musk. Just no matter what they do or a certain person has done, just fuck that person. And I think that there is some truth to that with Jews because they, that was the whole thing in Germany is they were looked at as sort of the 1%, the people that were, eating all the money, and they were the elite, and then they were demonized that way. I would really love to see a Holocaust movie show that aspect of it, but I think he's kind of right. I think that there's something to them just being hyper successful, and people don't like that.
Yeah, certainly. The only way I can kind of rationalize what's happening as far as I guess it's kind of weird, right? Because I don't know, but you have the Ukraine, Russia, and it seems obviously it was very much pro Ukraine, and then Russia is the aggressor and everything. But I guess what I was trying to say is that I'm kind of almost viewing it as this evolution of the story of the good guy and the bad guy, I suppose. Almost if you can kind of walk through it through Disney to a certain extent, is that you had the older Disney movies where it was very clear, black and white, there was the bad person, there was the good person. And it seems as time has gone on, we're seeing more and more of the back history or the origin stories of these Maleficent, was it Maleficent? I think that's what it is. Something like that. You're seeing the backstories of some of these bad people, and it's kind of giving you an idea of what's made them that way, and also it's not so much that they've chosen to be evil, but that the world is kind of put them in that position, so they're a victim of themselves ultimately. So I kind of wonder if there's the collective consciousness of trying to better understand what makes a person do what they do. Makes me wonder if that's why maybe the world was a little bit more open to explaining why Hamas did what they did. Everyone's condemning what Hamas did, but there seems to be a lot more of just there's a reason why this happened. And then I was trying to tie it in with Ukraine, Russia, but I don't think it's as much on that one. But in the sense of like NATO going into Ukraine was, a lot of people are saying that's the reason why Russia attacked in the first place. You're kind of seeing like this, explanation for why these things are happening, opposed to just like the blank slate, black and white. This is they're the aggressors. They deserve to get blown off the planet and everything. So I'm wondering like what the difference is between, obviously we have history as past and everything, but were people on the side of like Germany, I guess, whenever they were up and coming before they started doing like the Holocaust stuff? Like were there sympathizers, or was it very much? Yeah, was there? Yeah,
there were for sure. Well, and there's a lot of people even now that'll say that they understand. I don't want to say any names, but people that that, and I don't even necessarily think that this is a bad thing. You just have to hit the brakes real quick. But there were some justifications for them being frustrated at the time. I mean, there is a problem with economic inequality, and if you have enough of that, people do get frustrated. It's. I mean, in a lot of. I personally think, like, in this country, I think that we put too much emphasis on that instead of noticing, like, that poverty in general means a very different thing now than it did 20 years ago. But either way, like, you have enough economic inequality, you're going to piss people on the bottom off. And I think that was partially what was going on. And then it was... I'm trying to learn more about that piece of history, but I think that people did. I mean, like I said, people still do go. I get why, that happened there. And it would have happened, maybe not to that extreme, but had Hitler not risen to power, somebody else would have, because he was just capitalizing on the resentments of that country at that time.
Right. Because have you seen All Quiet on the Western Front yet?
I watched about half of it, but she's going to be out of town again, and I was going to ask you to give me some movie ideas, so maybe I'll finish that. That's World War I, right?
Yep, yeah. So there's just like the end of the movie. There's like a couple of lines when they're signing the treaty and everything that I think is kind of applicable to the conversation. But yeah, I think it's worth finishing. Did you not like it, or did you fall asleep or something?
I don't remember. I think there was something else going on, but I liked it. I liked the idea of showing like I got to the point where they're kids and they're all excited and they go over, and then I think like a couple of them don't die immediately, right. And he's like, "Holy shit!" And I think that's a healthy message to show people.
Yeah, I liked it immediately because of the opening scene where you see that initial battle. And then that kid dies, and then it shows the whole process of like them getting the bodies and taking the clothes off, and then cleaning the clothes and restitching the clothes, and then like putting them back. Yeah, I thought that was like eerily amazing, a depiction of war that you don't usually see at all.
No, you're right, Jim.
So I loved it for that reason. I liked how dark it was, and just it kind of kept pushing that message. But that opening scene, I think, was probably my favorite of the entire movie. Was the first like 5-10 minutes, something like that. So
I'll finish it. Yeah, I got a few days by myself, like 5 or 6 days by myself later on this week. So I'll finish it.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Yeah, I guess it's just trying to figure out, like, I guess like what you and Brian said last time, in the sense of, just it's history, and it's kind of pounded into our heads as far as like, the whole idea of like history is written by the victors, so this idea of like of back in World War II or, any other war that maybe it could be argued is the aggressor or something like that, it's just not seen that way. And, maybe all of like the civilian casualties or all of the rough edges are kind of like, steamed away a little bit. And it's just like, the war was fought, the war was won, we beat fascism, we beat communism and stuff like that. But it just seems kind of weird now. And I guess that's what I'm trying to wrap my mind around is this moment different with these wars because of like social media or the internet, or is this just what happens with war in general, is that there's like, a huge group of sympathizers and a huge group of, sympathizers on both sides, I guess. So.
Well, I want to say, like, I kind of appreciate what you're saying because we're watching that show, the World War II show on Netflix, All the Light You Cannot See. We've only seen the first episode. And I was saying that one of the things that I wish that they would show and stuff like that is really what it was like. Instead of just these guys are evil, which they were, but showing how people got sucked into that. Mm-hmm. Because they never do that. And I think that we would be able to look at our present history and kind of look at that and go, okay, well, are we kind of repeating history a little bit? Because I think that we are. But I think when you just look back on it, it's very easy to go good guy, bad guy, and which they are. I mean, there is a good guy and there is a bad guy. Like just objectively speaking, what's better for the world and what's worse. But I think that you lose a lot when you don't teach people. This is a Jordan Peterson type thing. This is what, he talked about Ordinary Men, which I bought that book for my dad and stepdad a couple years ago. And, it really shows how people got sucked into that. I think that that's really important to show. But I think as far as just like young people with social media and all that, I think people get caught up and just do whatever the people in their immediate, I'll just say their culture. I don't think that people really know what they're saying. I work with some younger people who have brought some of this stuff up, and I have to keep my mouth shut because, I'm getting better at that as I get older. But you just ask a couple questions, they have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, they watch a couple news programs, and Israel is it might as well be the Nazis as far as and it's like you don't. That's not how this happens. I mean, I like you said something a couple weeks ago about how the guy in the Piers Morgan interview, and he was kind of talking about how he had a wife. I haven't seen it yet, so correct me if I'm wrong. But he was talking about how he has family in Palestine that he doesn't know if they're alive or dead, or he's got family or friends that and that's a real thing. But I think with this in particular, like it's not the Palestinians that are bad; it's that group, specifically that group, Hamas. And if Hamas was a group of white Westerners that were doing the exact same thing, we would be looking at it very differently. I mean, we would. If anybody with a lighter color skin with that same rhetoric that was speaking out against Jews and calling for genocide like that, as happily as they are, we would be having a completely different discussion about it, I think.
Well, I think part of like the confusion with me too is that it seems like I am seeing people talk about like equating Palestine with Hamas and Hamas with Palestine. Like they're just making them the same thing, conflating the two. I guess like people arguing that it's the Palestinian people that voted in Hamas to begin with.
Yeah.
There was one guy I think that was also on Piers Morgan. Because once again, like Piers Morgan has been doing for like 2 months now. It's just been nothing but Israel and Hamas and Palestine conversations and everything, which I haven't watched nearly all of them, but like certainly a handful. And one guy that was talking about it actually might have been Douglas Murray now I think about it, but just like whenever like the people were pulled over to the Gaza side and like people were spitting on the body, I think of that girl and everything, and then Piers Morgan was talking about just like that's a sample size, that's not representative of the people. And Douglas Murray was saying just like, well, what are the odds that you just happen to go in like this like random sample size and you're getting all these people that are spitting on this corpse and stuff like that. So he was kind of arguing, I thought, it seemed to me that that it is basically the Palestinian people that are like this, and it makes me kind of question just like, well, what was the origin of them even being put in like these quote unquote concentration camps or put in these territories anyways, so it just seems like there's a lot of like weird confusion happening with all of this, because I think that if it stayed with like it's just Hamas, it's not Palestine. But it doesn't seem to me that people are saying that. It seems to me that they're saying it's all of Palestine, and then with all, I guess, the civilian casualty with Israel, it just seems like there's not really a whole lot of, trying to separate the two, I guess.
Well, I think there's like a Venn diagram where you would have like Palestine and Hamas, and the middle circle would just be very big. Like, I think that from what the way I've heard it described is, it would be like if the United States elected the Congress was like 55% KKK. It would be similar to that, except way worse. I mean, and so I think they're just at the mercy of these radicals that they voted in, and but it's beyond. Douglas Murray, I've been watching a lot of his stuff lately, but and I try to keep in mind that he very clearly has a bias, but I think he's right about a lot of stuff. Like he was saying, I might have sent y'all this actually, but he was saying that one of the differences between what's going on now and what happened in World War II is that, and this is again from that book Ordinary Men, they talk about this, how they had to get really drunk. I mean, the German government would buy alcohol for the soldiers because they were having trouble dealing with what they were doing, and they would just get shit faced every night. But with this situation, they're enjoying it. Like you rip a baby apart. I heard a story today actually. I can't believe I forgot about this till just now, where somebody took a pregnant Jewish woman and cut her open and pulled the baby out and made her look at the dead baby while she was bleeding. I mean, that's beyond just. That's you're enjoying that's sadism at that point. And it comes from probably I don't even know psychologically how you get to that point. I mean, you're probably just raised to hate those people. And I'm sure the Jews hate, they have their own hatred for Muslims, but Jesus Christ, I mean, it's pretty, when I heard that story, that's next level, man. Like, I don't know how you do that as a person. And it's so far beyond anything I can imagine.
Right. I mean, it's just like, how do you weed that out of, the population and everything? So I don't know. Like I said, I'm just kind of torn. Like, I don't think I've landed on either side because it just seems so convoluted right now that, it's like I saw some girl that I think from Egypt, she was talking about the people that she knows in Gaza and how they're, trying to get into Egypt and everything. And someone else that was talking about that, just because they voted in Hamas doesn't necessarily mean that they were happy about it. It's just like the alternatives that they have. And when it comes to your survival, if this is where you live, there's a certain level of you have to, get by, I guess, So for some of these people that are arguing that, they voted them in, they're just as evil as Hamas themselves and that they're all basically Hamas. I guess that's the counter argument is that there's just they're stuck there. They can't really leave or anything, from my understanding. So what choices are they left with ultimately, except for extremism?
Yeah.
So
I'm sympathetic to that too. I mean, I to a much lesser degree. I think about this a lot when it comes to when I see a movie that's made in Europe and there's American actors there. I always wonder, especially right after Donald Trump was elected, I wonder if it doesn't have to be movies, that's just what I consume, but any business, I always wonder how much the European citizen is kind of judging the American based on who they elected, right. And that's just one example, but I think you know what I mean by that. But I don't know, I'm sympathetic to anybody that's stuck in a situation where, by the way, I'm not relating Donald Trump to Hamas. That's just, I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I am sympathetic to anybody that's just trying to raise a family and just trying to get by. And I think that underscores stuff like this. I mean, really how lucky we are that we don't have to. It's something I've been thinking about a lot more lately is shit, man. This is not shit that we have to deal with here. Mm-hmm. I mean, not that everything's easy, but just having to. Can you imagine just having to live through that? You right. Can't. How do you? I don't know. You have to have religion at that point just to get through it, I think. But,
mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's like everything in life, there's nuance to it, And I definitely am more sympathetic to the Israelis for a billion different reasons, but I get it. I'm sympathetic. I don't wish no ill will on anybody that doesn't have a dog in the fight, but they just outside of where they are geographically.
Yeah, it just seems like no one's quite put their finger on it, which is, I mean, it's probably just an impossibility as far as like what that answer is, or what like that, conclusive statement would be that would kind of sum it all up ultimately. And I've certainly been trying to better understand what's going on and why it's going on, and thinking about the innocence versus the perpetrators and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's as murky gets. I guess with some of these things, but I was,
Elon Musk went over there.
Yeah, he spoke to Netanyahu, didn't he, or something like that?
I think. I listened to a clip of it. That's where I heard about the baby being cut out of the woman. I listened to that a couple hours ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw. I think like a thumbnail of him and Netanyahu when he had gone over there, something like that. But I hadn't watched it or anything. But yeah, it's just it's really strange because. I guess I'm just kind of at a loss for words, really, because it just seems like any angle you go at it, it's like you're missing a whole side of it, or even more or less, or something like that. Because yeah, it's just like you just imagine that there's just fucking people there. It's just like if like you or I are just hanging out in Oregon and Texas, and then it just so happens a government is running one of these states, and then all of a sudden, like, a bomb just gets dropped on my house. And it's just like, I have nothing to do with that,
Yeah.
So I guess that's the angle that I'm very sympathetic to. But then I guess, like, the horror from the other side, and it seems almost to me like they're kind of like they're taken off guard, and they're so fearful of what just happened that it could be worse, that they're just trying to blow everything off the map in order to make sure that nothing happens again, like there's not more horror on their end.
You talking about Israel?
Yeah, it almost kind of seems to me like they're just maybe like you could say overdoing it just in this out of this like fear response of just what happened ultimately.
I think so.
Which is like how do you not have that response? Because I mean certainly if someone's coming to kill you, that's like the whole thing with like these people that are coming into like convenience stores and holding up the place, and these people are like killing them, and then they're going to jail even though the person that came in to steal from them had a gun or was threatening them and everything. It's just like when you're in that situation, there's not like, do I shoot them in the toe or the leg, or how do I ease them down to make sure that they're not a threat? It's just like you don't have that kind. I mean, I'm sure cops could speak to this all day and night. Yeah. Of like there's no games to be played here. It's like you stop or I make you stop immediately, because I can't let this get out of my hands that I end up dead, and now my wife's a widow and my kids are without a dad. So it's like it's impossible to not do that, I think. So
yeah, no, I think I anytime, I mean, using that analogy, I mean, I think in that analogy specifically, you're not going to be thinking as level-headed as you were 5 minutes before, just trying to buy a tank of gas, because your adrenaline spikes. And with the history of with the history of Israel, they are really like, we're not fucking around anymore. I think that they feel that way, and it's also important to keep in mind that they are. I think they're the size of New Jersey or equivalent to that, surrounded by all these groups of people around them that don't, these countries around them that have, a faith that is antithetical to them. One other thing, though, is I think it was Oliver Stone was on Bill Maher's podcast, not his show, but his podcast, and they were talking about this. I think it was that one, but, the Jews have been around for thousands of years. Islam is a relatively new religion, comparatively. It's newer than Christianity. Of the big three, it's the newest. And so you could make the argument that the Jews were there first. I don't like playing that game, that whole thing, like who was here first. I think it's kind of childish. But, I mean, I think that is, you could make that argument. And, and then they get, is shysted a derogatory term towards Jews? I don't know. But they get shysted, and then they have nothing. And then so, post World War II, 1948 comes around, and they're able to get, I think they figured this out in 47, and then they signed it in 1948. And now they have just this little sliver of land, and they know that, they don't have very many friends in the surrounding area. So you fuck with them, they're gonna overreact. I don't know if it was an overreaction or not. I don't know, but I can see why somebody would say it would, and I'm sympathetic to that view.
Yeah, two terms for me that are like weird to say is like Jimmy rig or like gypped. I'm told those are bad things to say, which I've certainly said a lot throughout my entire life because I made no association with it being about gypsies or with black people. It was just a term that I knew how to apply. So that's.
I didn't know Jerry rig was derogatory. I didn't know that till just now.
Jimmy rig, yeah, it's like a. I guess maybe Jerry rig is a variation or something like that. But yeah, from my understanding, Jimmy rig is like referencing just like how a black person would do it. It's like they would rig it in a Jimmy way, if you will. So. Yeah, I guess you just try and imagine, those movie moments, I suppose, which, more or less are supposed to be these moral tales, right? Of like maybe what's a better way of going about things. So it's like that person that, like you've seen Prisoners.
Yes.
Fucking
a few times.
Amazing movie. It's really hard to watch for obvious reasons now for me, but it's still really good. But it's that like what's right moment. I think that movie does a good job of blurring that because when you have like the other family where the guy's just like I'm not gonna stop you, but I'm not gonna help you either. It's that like I can't for my moral code or for whatever internal thing I have going on. I can't do it, but I know that's the right way. Or even like a quick example, like with Sicario, at the very end, whenever he like has the gun on Emily Blunt, says just like sign the paper, and she signs it, and he walks out, and she comes out with the gun to shoot him, and she can't shoot him because it's just like there's an understanding of like a certain thing is necessary, but there is like that other variation too of like that like someone's killed somebody. And the person is like going more or less rabid, and like you have the other person trying to hold them back before they do something they'll regret and everything. So it's like you're trying to wrestle with like all of those different variety of emotion, all to a violation, I guess, if you will, against yourself or your family. So it's like there probably isn't really a right answer. It's just trying to make sure that you don't tip over. Too far, I guess. But I know it's like hard to find that line. I don't think any of us can really like tread that perfectly. It's like you need that other person to kind of push you back, and I don't think I had that necessarily that idea about like America potentially. I think someone made that argument like America should be that person that's just like I understand. I'm gonna hold you, but like I'm gonna hold you back and everything. While trying to help you eradicate, the problem and everything. So,
well, I can't. I've been wondering a lot lately, like how different this would look under a different administration.
Sure.
Or how different the Ukraine thing would look. I definitely think that situation would be a lot different.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest. This is a slight change of subject, but there were a lot of celebrities that have come out in like the last couple of weeks in support of Trump because of the interesting one to me was Michael Rappaport, who I'm a big fan of. He's a comedic actor. He does sports commentary, but he posted this video about it, and he's like, I can't do this anymore with this guy. Talking about Biden. He's like, I can't. I think he was talking about the border crisis specifically and what happened in New York after that. But it's interesting to think what would happen to some of these conflicts overseas if there was a different administration and how it would be handled. But I try to look at a lot of this, not saying I'm getting entertainment out of somebody else's suffering, but it's very interesting to watch this happen in real time and think about where this could go. Because I think I heard a theory that this could turn into like a proxy war where Iran hits Israel, and then at that point it would be like World War III. China would then get involved. I don't remember all of I'll see if I can find it and send it to you, but it was talking about the relationship between some of these countries and how this could turn into a proxy war between China and America if Iran got involved, which Iran did get involved briefly. there's something else still going on because there's a couple articles that keep popping up about this, and it's just not getting reported on too much, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it's not as important as I'm thinking it is, but it's there's a lot going on right now, and it's interesting to see. I try to keep that in mind a lot. Like this is every period is a period in history, but I think this is a very interesting time to be alive and to kind of watch some of this and go, how, what's it going to be like to discuss this period of time in another 30, 40 years?
Yeah, it's like I'm even more so like confused, I guess, because I just watched, I don't know if you watched the Lex episode with Zuckerberg in the metaverse.
I didn't.
You didn't watch that one? I hadn't watched it either, and just for some reason last night, I think maybe it just came on, I just kept watching it. But it's like I see stuff like that, and like they're talking about just being able like to meet, in the metaverse, and like they have like this like photorealistic versions of themselves, which I guess they did a thing where it's like they take a bunch of pictures of different expressions, and so that way they can kind of map it onto like your actual movements with the map quest on and everything. So it looks very real. I remember when the video first started, it shows Lex. I was just like, I swear I'm not used to him like standing and like like making gestures and everything. And it was like a couple minutes into it, I realized it was like very small things are off. And it was just like it was the metaverse version of him and everything. It was just very impressive, and just how optimistic they were about the future, and just like being able to meet like that, and just the applications of like gaming or just like talking to AIs in the metaverse. And Zuckerberg was talking about like they're trying to like create like historical people in the metaverse, and celebrities in there.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's like you could like walk around and talk with Abe Lincoln while you're in the metaverse or something like that. Lex was really kind of hooked on one thing where he's just like, I almost kind of like just want to like observe myself, like just talk to myself and like be with myself in the metaverse, and just kind of like from this outside perspective, like see how I move and how I react and how I look and everything. And it's just like this wild, amazing possibility, and it made me kind of like more upset that I'm like 34. I was like, I wish I was 24. I wish I had like 10 more years into like what this is going to turn into, especially with Zuckerberg saying he's like by the end of the decade, it's probably going to be, like glasses and not these huge headsets, and it's going to be holograms are everywhere. And it's going to be, I guess the third version is coming out, just came out this fall or something, and it's supposed to be more of like that mixture of reality and holograms in the real world and everything, opposed to like straight VR. So it's like that's super exciting, and then seemingly the world's at war, which could just erase all of that, and the dark ages all over again, right?
Well, I have this kind of, I have a buddy of mine who I text quite a bit, and he's kind of more in line with your type of thinking, in that he kind of says it's all going to be okay, which, by the way, I think it will be too eventually. I think that we're in a period that is going to be hard to get over. I think I'm optimistic long term, but I think we're in a weird, I think that we're almost in a bit of denial about how fucking batshit crazy this period of time is. And I can't help but bring the gender stuff into this when I think of that, because it's so, it's just, it's batshit insane. I mean, it's just so crazy. And I think that we're going through a really weird period where we're losing touch. We're literally losing touch with reality. And what dangers does that bring into the world? And but I see that more than you do because of where I live. But are you still as optimistic as you were seeing all this? Like, do you have any fears that you didn't have before? Or are you still sort of thinking like, God, it'll be fine? Like, this is just a weird time.
I kind of think so. Almost just because of like the Ukraine and Russia thing seems to be kind of like winding down for reasons unknown to me. But I guess that's kind of like the story I've been seeing people kind of talk about, is that with this whole other Israel thing, that Ukraine thing's just kind of over with, and that Russia's just going to basically take that little bit of land in the east of Ukraine, and that's just going to be the end of it. So I mean, if that's just what ends up happening, is that it's like this fear of when it first pops off that it could pop off into a bigger thing, but it could just as easily fizzle out, seemingly like this Ukraine-Russia thing is. And of course, it could still turn around naturally, but I guess I'm still optimistic because of things like that. I don't know. I haven't seen anything to necessarily make my thoughts too dark on the outlook of the future, so I think we'll still be okay. It's just kind of like this, like the juxtaposition of like the advance of technology, but still like this archaic, war and everything. I suppose it just kind of seems like it's like a weird double life that the whole world's living, I guess.
I think one of the things that is worrying to me is like out here how bad crime is getting. I took a picture the other day, and it's a block from my house, and it said "Kill all Salem pigs" on it was spray painted on the thing. There was a Walmart that's about half a mile from here. Somebody was shot and killed in the head about 2 weeks ago. There's it's really bad, man. Like it's really bad, but it's not just here. It's in Portland's way worse. San Francisco's really bad. Everywhere, it's Dallas has its bad areas, but as far as crime goes, it's just a different world up here, man. And that stuff kind of freaks me out. It would be nice if we could do something like what they did in Austin, where they defunded the police and then realized their mistake. But it's I don't know if there's migration. There's just mass migration to different cities in the country, but there's just so many problems. It seems like what was happening in New York that we touched on earlier with the immigration crisis, which I really didn't know that much about until kind of recently, about how they were funneling just mass amounts of immigrants up to New York City, and it was creating a huge problem. Are you familiar with that?
I don't think so.
Yeah, we'll have to put that on the thing to discuss at a certain point. And then did you hear about San Francisco when Xi Jinping came in and what they did, what Gavin Newsom did?
Got cleaned up, yeah.
That's so weird to me. That's so insane to me.
Right.
And his thing was, well, if you have guests over, you clean up your house. I was like, that's the wrong thing to say, man. Right. I mean, Gavin Newsom, to me, looks like he's a very good-looking man, but if I was making a movie about the Antichrist, I would make him look like that. Like a guy that's very good-looking, but there's just this thing in his eyes that are almost like if I was one of those people that believed in, like, lizard people controlling the world, I'd be like, that dude. That dude is a lizard person. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a bizarre, it's a very weird, turbulent time. And it is in this country too. This country is just so big that it's in different spots. But, yeah, I mean, I think, my fear locally is that it is getting worse. Like crime is getting worse. It's not slowing down. And I talk to people at the restaurant who are older, who have been in the city for 20 years, and I always ask them, I'm like, yeah, like what is the difference? And almost every time they're like, it's getting worse. I talked to an old lady the other day who's like, my daughter and her husband just moved out, or they just moved to a different state, and it's just it's cranking up pretty bad. And I don't know. That's off topic, but I say that to just sort of give context to my thoughts on that sound very pessimistic. Lately, that's how I feel. I see just a lot of this stuff, and I see all this in the news, and it's just almost like an overload for my brain.
Well, it's just strange to me because I just don't know how the election in 24 is going to go, because everyone predicted this red wave, in the midterms, and it didn't happen. Republicans still won the House, but obviously by a slim majority. So it's like I always kind of feel like that moment in Oppenheimer, whenever.
Did you see it?
I did, yeah. Didn't I tell you about that?
Maybe, I don't think so.
Maybe I didn't. It's very good. I liked it a lot. But the moment where I thought Josh Hartnett in that movie.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, this is like, you should be in more movies now. I was like, I watched your The Faculty when I was a kid and everything, and like you had that role But like, you're a good adult, I think, in a movie. I was very impressed by just the way he held himself and the way he was acting and everything. But the scene where he comes in, he's talking to Oppenheimer. He's telling him he needs to like stop with the communist or whatever it is thing in the classroom. And he's just like, there's things that are bigger than you and I can't bring you in if you're doing all of this. And I'm just kind of think about that with like the Republican Party a little bit. It's just like, if you just like got rid of the wacky shit and just went to like basic virtues and morals and everything, just like, we need to get the country back on track as far as like, there is a rule of law. We need to have a budget, just like simple things like that, and just like bring it back from like the verge of whatever's going on. It's like that's what we need, is like that huge moderate, I think, and just bring it back, because I think most people just don't know what to do as far as a vote. It's just like, well, I don't want to vote in the fascists, but then the left is fucking making everything worse, and we're about to be in World War III. So I just think it's like a weird place for all of us to be in as far as a vote.
Well, I suspect that you're going to get your wish. I really do think that is one of the only solutions, is that people kind of get more moderate. Mm-hmm. Because it really just... I was texting with Michael today, and it really does feel like it's just... It feels like it's just... Tucker Carlson, I don't know if I sent you this, he had a thing about a month ago where it's like a 14-minute speech, and in it he is saying, that everybody kind of instinctively knows that abrupt change is coming. And he goes, if you walked into church in the last year, they're talking about the end times. I don't know if he's religious or not. I don't think he's like saying that that's going to happen. I think he's saying, he's using that as a way to illustrate his point. But he's like, there's something like this is, cranking up to something. And I think he's right. I don't know what that means. I don't know how that, but I think one of the only ways you bring that down is by voting in moderates. I mean, I agree 100% with what you just said. But I kind of suspect that people are going to start seeing that, because the last couple of weeks, it was weird. The amount of celebrities I saw reversing their, I mean, I'm sure they're still blue, but reversing their opinion on, the Biden-Trump thing.
Right.
It's just like, this isn't working. Like, this is just not working. We can't, it's clearly fucked up. We have to calm this down. And I mean, you look all over the country, the most fucked up places are blue states.
Yeah.
By far,
Well, I know, I was talking to one of Nicole's uncles, and he was saying how he saw this video of Steve Bannon, and just, he was talking about, like, Trump isn't even one of us, in the sense of like how far right he is, I guess, is what he was trying to say. He's like, if we had our say of like who we had in office, like, you would be begging for Trump or something, in the sense of like how moderate he is. And I think Trump actually is very moderate, personally, on a lot of issues. I think what he's been talking about with the abortion issue, where it should be this kind of like a limit, but not all out and out ban and everything. And I think he's really like, I think people will say that what he's doing is he's like trying to not answer questions, but the way I viewed it is that he's not answering a question, but it's not settled on the American psyche, I think. And so therefore it's not like, it's not really settled with him, in the sense of like, well, there's going to be votes by the people and by the representatives, and by that point I'll make a decision, but at this moment in time I'm not necessarily clear on what that answer is. So I think, I don't know, that might be what that is that maybe he is that moderate, oddly enough. I don't know.
Well, it's true. He actually isn't that far right. I mean, I think that the things people have an issue with him is how cocky he can be, and that whole, like, to me, the funniest thing he ever said was "Kung flu" during COVID. I swear I think about that like once a day. Makes me laugh. I think he just has this like over-the-top attitude that people don't like, and I have an issue with it too. I mean, I don't think I'm much more on his side than I ever have been, but I don't think that that's the best way to conduct yourself as the president of the United States. But he really isn't. I mean, he's more anti-war than any other president we've had in my lifetime, except for maybe maybe no, that's not even true. I was going to say Clinton, but maybe that's not true. He's the first president to go into the White House being pro-gay marriage. For instance, he had Peter Thiel in his cabinet, who's a gay man. Like he's very moderate, honestly, but he just has that attitude that I think people don't like, and I understand why they don't. I think people put words in his mouth too much. I don't think that he's nearly as bad as people say. I think people turn other people into demons. They turn their opponents into demons, and I think that's what's happening here. I've been guilty of it. I do it. I mean, I genuinely believe that in some cases. Like, some of this shit freaks me out, but
sure,
Yeah,
I guess we'll just see how it plays out ultimately. And, I guess some people are talking about, RFK Jr. could come out of nowhere and, win, and that'll be the first time we get an independent in the White House. I don't think that's going to happen, personally.
I don't either.
Because I think it makes a lot of sense that people are talking about, just like, it's a year out, everyone's talking big as far as like, oh, I'll totally vote for the independent, I'm so tired of the two-party system and everything. But then when it gets down to the wire, it's just like, well, if too many of us, like if I'm left and too many of us vote for the center, then the right might win because not enough of us voted for the left and everything. So I think that's a legit worry and truth, I guess, as far as how that happens and why independents probably haven't won. But I don't know. I mean,
if it didn't happen in 2016, it's not going to happen now. That I gave money to the Libertarian Party in 2016 to get Gary Johnson in there, just to get 5. If you get 5% in the polls, you can be part of the debates, and he couldn't even get 5%. I don't think. I mean, RFK Jr. is more popular than Gary Johnson was, but I agree with you. I don't think that that's a realistic option.
Yeah. I don't think so. So it's like, that's the only thing, is that it seems like it's what's happening now, which is like a messed up economy and the seemingly world at war, or it's just chaos in the States because everyone's just like, Trump's in the White House and it fucking sucks and I hate this and I'm gonna scream and yell and everything, but then maybe life isn't so bad besides the noise. I don't know. So it just seems like there's not going to be it's going to be another 4 years of just insanity in some form or fashion. So,
well, I gotta go in here in a second, but I'll be honest with you. I've had thoughts about, like, at what point does it get so crazy that I need to go back down there? I've had those thoughts.
Yeah,
I've had conversations about that, and like, I mean, I'll tell you this. It is like when I moved back down there the first time and I got my old job back, I remember there was an employee that has been there forever, and he came up to me and he said, "Welcome back to sanity." And I think about that a lot, and that's kind of true. I mean, it really gets to the points where, I mean, I go run every day, and it's relatively fine. Like, nobody really does anything. I've stopped going down some bad roads. Basically, there's a nicer neighborhood across, like, a couple blocks away. I'll go over and run through the nice neighborhood. But I mean, just the crime rate is getting so bad, and people are in denial about it. People don't want to admit there's a problem. A lot of the younger people don't want to admit there's a problem. And, some people, I think, get offended, like, you're attacking your family or something. It's like that your identity is part of where you live. But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of even weird hearing you say that, because most of the time you tend to be more optimistic, and I think I really think that at the end of the day, I think that we could go through a nuclear holocaust and human beings will get through it. I think human beings are very resilient. I think at the end of the day, humans are going to figure it out, and we're going to keep evolving, and we're going to go to the next thing. I really believe that. But I think short term, we're at a very weird place, and I try to look at it as just as like, all right, well, it'd be cool to live through a really bizarre time in history, and I think that that's what's happening. I also think, though, I'll shut up in a second, but you've made the comment about how it's always a weird time, and I've given that a lot of thought. And I think that ever since the Industrial Revolution, it's just gotten weirder. Like, because technology just speeds up, and I wonder if that has had some type of effect on our mind. It certainly has with social media. And I think just as it speeds up, I think that kind of is affecting the way that we behave and interact with each other. And I think that is the reason. It just is getting like that. So I think I agree with you on that. I just think that it's not slowing down. I think that it is. We go through these ebbs and flows of where it's relatively sane, and we're just in a really batshit crazy period right now. But I agree that it is always like an interesting time to be alive. But I think that it's just sped up ever since we started the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, it's almost like just like our collective consciousness, or depending on where we're at and everything, it's just like we're bent around whatever tech is there, whatever geographical challenges that we have to deal with and everything, whether we live like on an island or by the sea, or if we live by the mountains. Like, it just seems like, whatever a human is constantly bent by whatever it's incorporated with, I suppose. So I do think it's always been crazy, because just looking through history, you can see plenty of crazy shit that happened. The day before Thanksgiving, my dad, Bryce, and I, we went to Dealey Plaza, the 60th anniversary of when JFK got assassinated. A president fucking of the United States being assassinated, I think that's pretty fucking crazy. And I made the comment before, as far as like the 60s, I think, as far as the people from the 40s and 50s and how they viewed this, like, counterculture, I can only imagine, like, that was just, like, Satan and the devil itself coming out of nowhere, you know what I mean? But yeah, I just think it's like, I'd be interested, because even if you imagine yourself like in an Amish farm or something like that, it's just like your psyche is bent around the tools around you and what you have to do to survive. So I just think, yeah, it's definitely, it's different but the same. And hopefully one day I'll find a better way of like explaining it, but that's just kind of where I'm
at. I'll say one more thing about the 60s, comparing us to the 60s. The one big difference I'll say is that the 60s didn't last that long. Like, let's say 1968 is where it peaked. And then it kind of, but the kind of shit with all the nutty, like, let's let our grip on reality go, has been going on a little bit longer. And it hasn't seemed to slow down. It's just sped up. And, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking like, well, does there have to be a time frame on it? No, of course there doesn't. So I don't know. But
the question is, I know you have to go, but like real fast, the question I think would be like, what is the timeline? Because it's like, I would say maybe like 2016 when Peterson came around was maybe like when the gender thing first was like making it kind of big, but before that was like the Me Too movement, which was almost, I think that was kind of the culture at that point, was the Me Too, and had nothing to do with gender isn't real and all that kind of stuff. So I think there might have been like iterations, but there certainly has been like a long period of trying to make sense of things. But I guess that's just kind of once again what I argue would be always the case. So I mean, if 2016 was when the gender thing happened, it hasn't quite been 10 years yet. You know what I mean? So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I think that happened in 2015, and it was happening in Canada way more than it was here. And then it's crept into started to creep into some of the universities. And now it was before then, because 2015 I interviewed a person who was a they. So it was a little bit, but it didn't get into the mainstream until a little bit later. So we're pushing about 10 years-ish. Mm-hmm. But we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. We're having these conversations at just the right time. So.
Right. Indeed.